Here's Chapter 5, Part 2 of All Quiet on the Western Front. Um, what we've just seen in the first part of the chapter is the men talking about what they might be doing when they go back and how they feel hopeless. There were some very significant central ideas. We're still looking for imagery, we're still looking for contrast, and we're still looking for personification in this chapter. Chapters 4 and 5, those are the key ideas. Try and connect them to central ideas. Okay, Chapter 5, Part 2, page 88. The orderly room shows signs of life. Himmelstas seems to have stirred them up. At the head of the column trots the fat sergeant major. It is queer that almost all of the regular sergeant majors are fat. Himmelstas follows him, thirsting for vengeance. His boots gleam in the sun. So don't forget, he's still doing what they did in the beginning, which was what's more important is that your boots are shined instead of what human beings feel like. So Himmelstas is angry and he wants to go to this guy and he wants to report the soldiers that are at the front. We get up. Where's Jaden? The sergeant puffs. No one knows, of course. Himmelstas glowers at us wrathfully. That means he looks at him angrily. And wrath is anger and rage. You know very well. You won't say. That's the fact of the matter. Out with it. Fatty looks around inquiringly, but Jaden is not to be seen. He tries another way. Jaden will report at the orderly room in 10 minutes. Then he steams off with Himmelstas in his wake. In his wake means behind him. I have a feeling that next time we go up wiring, I'll be letting a bundle of wire fall on Himmelstas's leg, hints Krop. We'll have quite a lot of jokes with him, laughs Mueller. That is our sole ambition, to knock the conceit out of a postman. I go into the hut and put Jaden wise. In other words, I tell him what's going on. He disappears. Then we charge our posse and lie down again to play cards. We change our posse and lie down again to play cards. We know how to do that, to play cards, to swear, and to fight. Not much for 20 years, and yet too much for 20 years. An example of contrast and irony. Half an hour later, Himmelstas is back again. Nobody pays attention to him. He asks for Jaden. We shrug our shoulders. Then you'd better find him, he persists. Haven't you been to look for him? Krop lies back on the grass and says, have you ever been out here before? That's none of your business, retorts Himmelstas. I expect an answer. Very good, says Krop, getting up. See up there where those little white clouds are? Those are anti-aircraft. We were over there yesterday. 5 dead and 8 wounded. And that's a mere nothing. Next time, when you go up with us, before they die, the fellows will come up to you, clink their heels, and ask stiffly, please, may I go? Please, may I hop it? We've been waiting here a long time for someone like you. So he's being ironic and sarcastic, and he's saying, yeah, all your little orders aren't going to mean a thing up there on the front. Nobody's going to listen to you. He sits down again, and Himmelstas disappears like a comet, simile. 3 days, CB, conjectures Cat. Next time, I'll let fly, I say to Albert. That means next time I'll fart. But that is the end. The case comes up for trial in the evening. In the orderly room sits our lieutenant, Bertink, and calls us in one after another. I have to appear as a witness and explain the reason of Jaden's insubordination. Insubordination means to be disrespectful of somebody who is in authority. Like when you guys yell at me or curse at me or tell me something nasty, or when I tell my superior something nasty, which sometimes happens. And when we all get emotional and angry in the moment and we say something. And so the people who are our bosses, I'm your boss, I have bosses, those bosses have bosses, they can charge us with insubordination and give us a penalty of some sort. So they're charging Jaden with insubordination because he talked back to Himmelstas. The story of the bedwetting makes an impression. Himmelstas is recalled, and I repeat my statement. So what the soldiers are doing is they're saying how awful Himmelstas is in response to Jaden's being punished. They want to say Himmelstas is an awful person. When he did the bedwetting thing, he put 2 bedwetters together and made one, pee on top of the other. So he tries to evade the question. Is that right? Bertink asks Himmelstas. He tries to evade the question, but in the end has to confess, for Krop tells the same story. Why didn't someone report the matter then? Asks Bertink. We are silent. He must know himself how much use it is in reporting such things. It isn't usual to make complaints in the army. He understands it all right, though, and lectures Himmelstas, making it plain to him that the front isn't a parade ground. Then comes Jaden's turn. He gets a long sermon and 3 days open arrest. Bertink gives Krop a wink and 1 day's open arrest. It can't be helped, he says to him regretfully. He is a decent fellow. So he gives him the lightest sentence that he could possibly get, understanding that Himmelstas is an awful person who abuses his power. Abuse of power is a huge thing in this book. Open arrest is quite pleasant. The Clink, the jail, was once a fowl house, a place where chickens were raised. There we can visit the prisoners. We know how to manage it. Close arrest would have meant the cellar. They used to tie us to a tree, but that is forbidden now. In many ways, we are treated quite like men. An hour later, after Jaden and Krop are settled in behind their wire netting, we make our way into them. Jaden greets us, crowing like a rooster. He's happy. Then we play scat far into the night. That's a card game. Jaden wins, of course, the lucky wretch. When we break it up, Kat says to me, what do you say to some roast goose? Not bad, I agree. We climb up on a munition wagon. The ride costs us 2 cigarettes. Kat has marked the spot exactly. The shed belongs to a regimental headquarters. I agree to get the goose and receive my instructions. The outhouse, that's an outside bathroom, is behind the wall and the door shuts with just a peg. In other words, there's no lock on it. You just push a piece of wood into the thing. Kat hoists me up. I rest my foot in his hands and climb over the wall. Kat keeps watch below. I wait a few moments to accustom my eyes to the darkness. Then I recognize the shed. Softly, I steal across, lift the peg, pull it out, and open the door. I distinguish 2 white patches, 2 geese. That's bad. If I grab one, the other will cackle. Well, both of them. If I'm quick, it can be done. I make a jump, I catch hold of one, and the next instant, the second. Like a madman, I bash their heads against the wall to stun them. But I haven't quite enough weight. The beasts cackle and strike out with their feet and wings. I fight desperately, but Lord, what a kick a goose has. They struggle and I stagger about. In the dark, these white patches are terrifying. My arms have grown wings and I'm almost afraid of going up into the sky as though I held a couple of captive balloons in my fists. Then the row begins. One of them gets his breath and goes off like an alarm clock. A row means a fight. It's the British word for fight, like a fist fight. But in this case, the geese are fighting. Like an alarm clock, simile. Before I can do anything, something comes in from outside. I feel a blow, lie outstretched on the floor, and hear awful growls. A dog. I steal a glance to the side. He makes a snap at my throat. I lie still and tuck my chin into my collar. It's a bulldog. After an eternity, he withdraws his head and sits down beside me. But if I make the least movement, he growls. I consider. The only thing to do is to get hold of my small revolver, and that too before anyone arrives. Inch by inch, I move my hand toward it. I have the feeling that it lasts an hour. The slightest movement, and then an awful growl. I lie still, then try again. When at last I have the revolver in my hands, my hand starts to tremble. I press it against the ground and say over to myself, jerk the revolver up, fire before he has a chance to grab, then jump up. Slowly I take a deep breath and become calmer. Then I hold my breath, whip up the revolver. It cracks. The dog leaps howling to one side. I make for the door of the shed and fall head over heels over one of the scuttering geese. At full speed, I seize it again, and with a swing, toss it over the wall and clamber up. No sooner am I on top than the dog is up again as lively as ever and springs at me. Quickly, I let myself drop. 10 paces away stands Cat with the goose under his arm. As soon as he sees me, we run. At last, we can take a breather. The goose is dead. Cat saw to that in a moment. We intend to roast it at once so that nobody will be the wiser. I fetch a Dixie and wood from the hut, and we crawl into a small deserted lean-to which is kind of like a tent, but it's open on three sides and it only has a roof, like a tent, which we use for such purposes. The single window space is heavily curtained. There is a sort of hearth, like a fireplace, and iron plates set on some bricks. We kindle a fire. Cat plucks and cleans the goose. We put the feathers carefully to one side. We intend to make two cushions out of them, with the inscription, "Sleep soft," under shellfire. That's ironic. Sarcasm. The sound of the gunfire from the front penetrates into our refuge. The glow of the fire lights up our faces. Shadows dance on the wall. Sometimes a heavy crash, and the lean-to shivers. Aeroplane bombs. Once we hear a stifled cry, a hut must have been hit. Aeroplanes drone. The tack-tack of machine guns breaks out. But no light that could be observed shows from us. We sit opposite one another, Cat and I, two soldiers in shabby coats, cooking a goose in the middle of the night. We don't talk much, but I believe we have more complete communion with one another than even lovers have. That means they understand each other so much because they share camaraderie. They've done everything together. We are two men, two minute sparks of life. Outside is the night and the circle of death. We sit on the edge of it, crouching in danger. The grease drips from our hands. In our hearts, we are close to one another, and the hour is like the room, flecked over with the lights and shadows of our feelings cast by a quiet fire. What does he know of me or I of him? Formerly, we should not have had a single thought in common. Now we sit with a goose between us and feel in unison, are so intimate that we do not even speak. So in real life, if there hadn't been a war, they probably never would have met or had a conversation. They have nothing in common. One works one way, one works another way. One's a laborer, one's somebody who goes to school or does books. They never would have had anything to think, but because of the war, they share everything. It's the only thing that they know. This is also contrast and irony and all kinds of things. It takes a long time to roast a goose, even when it's young and fat, so we take turns. One bastes it while the other lies down and sleeps. A grand smell gradually fills the hut. The noises outside, increase in volume, pass into my dream and yet linger in my memory. In a half sleep, I watch Cat dip and raise the ladle. I love him, his shoulders, his angular stooping figure, and at the same time I see behind him woods and stars, and a clear voice utters words that bring me peace. To me, a soldier in big boots, belt, and knapsack, taking the road that lies before him under the high heaven, quickly forgetting and seldom sorrowful, forever pressing on under the wide night sky. So when he says that he loves Cat, he doesn't love him as in the gay sense that you would think. He loves him because he is another human being who's in this experience with him together. A little soldier and a clear voice, and if anyone were to caress him, he would hardly understand. This soldier with the big boots and the shut heart, who marches because he's wearing big boots and has forgotten all else but marching. Beyond the skyline is a country with flowers, lying so still that he would like to weep. There are sights there that he has not forgotten because he never possessed them. Perplexing, yet lost on him. Are not his 20 summers there? So he's trying to remember back to the days where everything was beautiful and he never really got a chance to experience them. So this whole paragraph is a study in contrast. Is my face wet? And where am I? Is he crying? Cat stands before me. His gigantic stooping shadow falls upon me like home. That's a simile. He speaks gently, he smiles and goes back to the fire, and then he says, "It's done." Yes, Cat. I stir myself in the middle of the room. I stir myself. That means I wake up. In the middle of the room shines the brown goose. We take out our collapsible forks and our pocket knives, and each cuts off a leg. With it, we have army bread dipped in gravy. We eat slowly and with gusto. That means we enjoy it wholeheartedly. How does it taste, Cat? Good, and yours? Good, Cat. We are brothers and press on one another the choicest pieces. Afterwards, I smoke a cigarette and Cat a cigar. There is still a lot left. When they say they're brothers, no, they're not actually brothers, so that's also a metaphor. but they feel like brothers. How would it be, Kat, if we took a bit to Crop and Jaden? Sure, says he. We carve off a portion and wrap it up carefully in newspaper. The rest we thought of taking over to the hut. Kat laughs and simply says, Jaden. I agree. We will have to take it all. So we go off to the fowl house to waken them. But first we pack away the feathers. Crop and Jaden take us for magicians. Then they get busy with their teeth. They eat right away. Jaden holds a wing in his mouth with both hands like a mouth organ. That's a harmonica. And gnaws. That means he chews and chews and chews on the bones. He drinks the gravy from the pot and smacks his lips. May I never forget you. We go to our hut. Again, there is the lofty sky with the stars and the oncoming dawn, and I pass beneath it. A soldier with big boots and a full belly. A little soldier in the early morning. But by my side, stooping and angular, goes Cat, my comrade. The outlines of the huts are upon us in the dawn, like a dark, deep sleep. So we end with a simile, and of course, one wants to wonder about the repetition of the idea that he's just a soldier with boots underneath this great heavenly sky, that's consistently eternal, but at the same time, holds his fate through war. Anyway, so that's the end of chapter 5. Don't forget to think about imagery and contrast. Repetition, we saw a lot of in this particular case. Repetition and there was some personification, not a whole lot. And this stark contrast between nature and war and humanity and earthly things and animal things, and between different kinds of people like Himmelstas and the other people, and even the sergeant who was kinder. He had to do his job. That's the dogma of the military. You've got to do what the rules say you have to do. But then there's a higher law, the one about humanity and how we treat people as we go forward. Okay? So next up, chapter 6, and different literary devices, perhaps some irony.